Welcome to the Tabletop Empire. My name is Nate, and today we are going to look at character creation for Star Wars RPG. This is going to be a full step-by-step guide for any GMs or PCs looking to make a player character or understand the process. This video is part of a larger beginner's guide series for Star Wars RPG. If you want to learn all about the system and how it plays step by step, breaking it down so it can be as easy as possible for you to learn, go check that out. I have a link down in the description below for the full playlist. This video will also build on some of the knowledge that we've learned in the previous 4 videos. And this video is sponsored by RPGsessions.com. They're a virtual tabletop made specifically for Star Wars RPG and Genesys RPGs. Stick around to the end of the video to find out more. Okay, so character creation goes through 10 different steps. Character background, obligation, duty, morality, select species, select career and specialization, spend XP, determine derived attributes, select motivations, gear and appearance, and group resource. Starting with step 1, this is going to be determining your character background. Star Wars RPG is a narrative tabletop RPG. It is very focused on the narrative. To help further that narrative, your character should be one that helps to tell an interesting and compelling story alongside the other player characters. So the first thing you'll want to do is to come up with the idea for your character before you even start building. This character idea can be as detailed as you want or as not detailed, but you really only need to have 2 things at a minimum. 1, who are they? And 2, what motivates them? And if you have trouble with coming up with a backstory, that second question of what motivates them, why does that motivate them? What's the story behind that? Here are a few character ideas to give an example of what I would maybe come up with if I was the one doing step 1. The first idea is a disgraced clone who has survived long past the Republic's fall. Discarded by the Empire, he now looks for work as a hired bodyguard. It's not much, but it reminds him of a time when he would protect his Jedi, his general, and his friend, who he betrayed and murdered thanks to the inhibitor chip he found out later. He fights this guilt daily, but protecting others and his friends is his way of atoning. My second idea is you're a small-time slicer who grew up in the slums of a city planet. One time during a job with your crew, you sliced into something you shouldn't have, and now you're on the run from a bounty that the Pikes placed on your head. Your goal is to raise the funds to clear your bounty, and if that fails, try to take down those who placed the bounty to begin with. And the third and final example, you are a junior scientist working in one of the Empire's secret bioweapon programs. However, you've discovered that you were force sensitive at the worst possible time, right in front of everyone at the lab. You thought you could hide it, but sometime in the following days, an Inquisitor shows up at your apartment and you barely escaped. Now you look to survive and find out all you can about the Force, so that way the next time that Inquisitor comes, you will be ready. If you were having trouble coming up with some ideas on your own, the book has an entire section on character backgrounds there to help give you those ideas. So I highly recommend reading through that section and see if there's anything that helps you brainstorm ideas. Another popular way to get inspired is to actually go and read through the careers and specializations later in character creation. That can give you a good idea of what your character is going to maybe focus on, and then you can build your character background from that. And character backgrounds are actually one of the things that you should bounce off of the GM and even some of the other party members and see what they think. Something that is really important is party cohesion, making sure that all the characters kind of work together. A very common misconception is that for your character in a TTRPG, you need to have some multi-page, full-on backstory with all the details, a little miniature book about your character. You don't need any of that. You really just need about as much as what I said earlier, which is really 1 paragraph. Though, the more you can give your GM in the way of your backstory, the more that they can implement parts of your backstory into the campaign, into the narrative, and will have an easier time tying your character's background into the current story. There are some really big benefits to writing out, a 2 or 3 page backstory, but again, don't feel obligated to. If you feel overwhelmed by that, just start with a paragraph or 2 and see what happens. For me, a common thing that I'll do is I'll start with 1 paragraph, maybe add, a little bit of details, and that maybe turns it into 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then maybe if I'm feeling motivated, I'll zoom in, so I'll take that 3 paragraphs and I'll tell that same story over the span of 2 pages, adding some more details in. But again, that's just me. You can do it how you want to do it. Okay, step 2, we're actually going to put pencil to paper, or if you're playing a game online, I'm going to show you how to create a character sheet in RPG sessions. If you need paper character sheets, you can scan them with a printer from the back of the core rulebook, or you can find some resources online. If you're playing online, you'll want to go to rpgsessions.com if this is the VTT that your table is using. Once you create an account with RPG Sessions, you'll go to the Library tab at the top, and then you're going to click on this Create New button. You're going to click Character, and then you're going to type your character's name, okay? And then you're going to select either Edge of the Empire, Force and Destiny, or Age of Rebellion, depending on the game that you're running. For my character, I'm just going to say Edge of the Empire. You're going to select Star Wars dice. You want to select Force die on, If you are playing a Force user, you'll want to make sure you check mark the Force rating. If you're playing in Edge of the Empire, you'll want to click Obligation. If you're playing in Age of Rebellion, you'll click Duty. And if you're playing in Force and Destiny, you'll click Morality. So I'm going to click all three just so I can show you each what they look like when we get to that part of character creation for each book. But you will only select the one that you need. Great, and now we have our character sheet. Let's go into step 2. Step 2 is all about obligation, duty, and morality. This is the one step that will be different depending on if you're playing in Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, or Force and Destiny. I'm going to go over each of these in detail, so if you only need one of them, use timestamps down below to skip to the part of the video that you need. Or if you want to learn how all of them works, stick around, up to you. Okay, so let's start with Edge of the Empire's obligation. What is obligation? It is a tangible or intangible debt that your character has at the start of the game. This could be a bounty contract on your head. It could be money that you owe to somebody. It could be an addiction to something like spice. It can even be a deep sense of duty or an oath to a person or a group. The bigger the obligation you have, the bigger magnitude value it has. The bigger magnitude value you have, the more likely that this thing is going to come back and affect you and the party during your sessions. The rulebook has a table with various options to choose from, and you can pick from whichever one you think best fits your character's background. Or if none of them really suits your character, you can chat with your GM and try to come up with one on your own that's custom. You are not limited to the options in the book. Your starting magnitudes will be determined by the GM, and GMs, you determine the starting magnitude based on how many players there are at the table. There is a reference table on page 40 of the book that will give you the recommended magnitude levels based on the party size. Players, you should also see another table that has some information on how you can choose to increase your starting obligation for additional starting XP or starting credits. You will need to decide if the higher likelihood of bad stuff happening is worth the extra starting bonus. Do what you want, but my personal recommendation is hold off on these bonuses for now. There are other parts of character creation that may require credits or XP, so you can wait until those parts of character creation to determine if you need or want the starting bonus. But I am going to go over the options, so here they are. For an additional 5 obligation, you can gain either 5 extra starting XP or 1,000 starting credits. There are also options for plus 10 obligation for 10 starting XP or 2,500 credits. Credits being Star Wars money and XP being what you use to level up your skills and your talents. You can choose any combination of these, but you can only choose each option one time, and you are limited to doubling your starting obligation. So if you start with 10 obligation, you can't take your obligation above 20. The GM, after everyone has made their character, is going to add together all of the magnitudes of everybody's obligation. So let's say this is 65 when you add it all up. At the beginning of each session, the GM will roll a D100, and if the number rolled is higher than 65, then nothing happens for that session. If they roll equal or lower than 65, then somebody's obligation is coming in to play that game. So let's say one player has a bounty obligation. That means a bounty hunter might show up and try to collect you this session. Fun. There are 2 options to choose from for how a GM can determine whose obligation triggers. I call each of these options either specific obligation or generalized obligation. Generalized obligation is just rolling to determine whether results are within the entire obligation window. In our example, this was between 1 and 65. If it triggers in this case, then every player will lower their strain threshold by 1 for that session, and the GM can choose whose obligation shows up in the story based on what might best fit the narrative that week. Or for those of you who don't have kids and get to play multiple times a week, I envy you. It's fine, my kids are worth it. We will touch on strain later in this video, but the short story is that it is your mental health bar. Specific obligation is rolling to determine which character specifically is affected. So if player character number 1 is between 1 and 10, player character 2 is between 11 and 30, and so on. Whoever it lands on has their obligation affect the story that session. That player has to decrease their strength threshold by 2 for the session, while every other character still has to decrease theirs by 1. Additionally, if the roll was a doubles number like 11 or 44 or 77, then the negative strain effect is doubled for everyone at the table. So keep that in mind when deciding whether or not you want to increase your obligation for starting bonuses. And GMs, I want you to remember this. It is your call on whether or not an obligation comes into effect for that story. If it would interrupt your plot or your narrative or whatever big thing you're going on, if it's like a special session where you're doing something really big and it just doesn't work to bring an obligation in, you do not have to. don't feel obligated, haha, to bring in their obligation into the story. But don't worry, because the players will still take their reduced strain threshold for that session because, you know, it's the stress of the possibility of your bounty hunter showing up or whatever your obligation is. Age of Rebellion's duty is going to be your focus within the Rebel Alliance. This could be intelligence, recruiting, sabotage, internal security, or even tech procurement. The rulebook has a table with various options to choose from, and you can pick from whichever one you think best fits your character's background. Or if none of them suit your character, you can work with your GM to come up with one on your own. You are not limited to the options inside the book. When duty is triggered, it represents the bolstering effects of morale and resolve on the party as a result of achieving personal commitments to the rebellion. Practically, this will boost your player's health bar for the session and the possibility of tangible opportunities being introduced into the story for a session, such as the opportunity to maybe steal Imperial battle plans, or maybe there's a possible unexpected new ally that you have the chance to meet. Your starting magnitude is going to be determined by the GM, and GMs, you can look at a table in the book on page 46 that will tell you the recommended magnitude levels based on the party size. Players, you should also see another table that has some information on how you can choose to decrease your starting duty for additional starting XP or starting credits. You will need to decide if a lower likelihood of good stuff happening is worth the extra starting benefits. Do what you want, but my personal recommendation is to hold off on this for now. You will be able to come back to this and add bonuses later if you get to a later part of character creation and find out that you need the XP or the credits. That said, here are your options. For -5 duty, you can either gain 5 starting XP or 1,000 extra starting credits. You can also choose to reduce your duty by 10 for 10 starting XP or 2,500 starting credits. Credits being Star Wars money and XP being what you use to level up your skills and your talents. You may choose any combination of these, but you can only choose each option one time and you cannot go below 0 for your duty. So if you only have 10 starting duty, you can only go down by 10. The GM, after everyone has made their character, is going to add up everybody's magnitudes of everybody's duty. So let's say it totals 25 when you add it up. At the beginning of each session, the GM will roll a D100, and if the number rolled is higher than 25, nothing happens for that session. If they roll equal to or lower than 25, then duty does trigger that session. When duty triggers, every player character will gain +1 to their wound threshold for the session. The GM can choose to trigger a specific person's duty by comparing the result rolled to a table of player duty, and whoever it lands on gets an additional +1 wound threshold for the session. Additionally, if the roll was a doubles number, like 11 or 44, then the wound threshold bonus is doubled for everybody at the table. GMs, I want you to remember that it is up to you on whether or not you want to provide a tangible opportunity to come into play when duty triggers. If it would mess up the flow or derail what's happening, you don't have to implement those things. The players still get their wound threshold bonus regardless. Force and Destiny's morality determines your relationship with the light side or the dark side of the Force, and this will be represented by a number between 1 and 100. If a character's morality is 29 and below, they have fallen to the dark side, while 71 and higher means that they are a light side paragon. I'm going to explain how all of this works so that way you can make an informed decision for your character. For conflict, you will start each session with 0. The evil and bad actions that you take in the game will generate conflict throughout the session, and at the end of the session, the conflict generated will determine if your morality moves towards the light or the dark side. Different actions will generate different amounts of conflict. For example, if you steal from somebody, you might gain 3 conflict. If you assault some innocent bystander, you may take 6 conflict. If you murder the random shopkeep in cold blood like the murder hobo your GM doesn't want you to be, then you might take 10 conflict. At the end of your session, you will roll a D10. You take the D10 result, subtract the conflict, and that is how your morality moves. So let's say you roll an 8. And you have 5 conflict. 8 minus 5 is 3, so you go up by 3. Let's say you rolled a 3 with 5 conflict. 3 minus 5 is -2, so your morality would go down by 2. Within your morality, you're also going to have an emotional strength and an emotional weakness. If you go to page 50 on Force and Destiny, you should see a table that has a list of all the emotional strengths with their corresponding weakness. Determine which one best fits your character and write them down on your character sheet in the corresponding box. During character creation, you get 1 of 4 starting bonuses for free. Your first option is you can take an additional 10 XP to spend during character creation. Your second option is to take 2,500 additional starting credits. Your third option is you get 5 XP and 1,000 credits. And the fourth option is that you can start with your morality at 29 or 71. So you can start as a light side user or a dark side user. What does it mean to be a light side user or a dark side user? I'm glad you asked. Let me explain. But before we do, let me clarify, I will be going more in depth on force powers later in the series when we reach the force chapter. But to give an idea of how force powers work, normally when you want to roll for a force power, you roll the white force die, and then you can spend light side points for free and you disregard the dark side pips. However, you can choose to use the dark side points for 1 destiny token to activate all of them, and then you gain 1 strain and conflict for each one you use. If you reach morality of 29 or below, then you become a dark side force user, which will change how this works a little bit. As a dark side user, you can spend dark side points for free, and if you want to use the light side points, you're going to have to spend the destiny point and then take strain for every light side point you use. Another dark side special rule is that at the beginning of every session when you're setting up the destiny pool, for every dark side user, you will flip over 1 light side point to the dark side. When your morality hits 20 or below, your strain threshold goes down by 1 and your wound threshold goes up by 1. And if your morality hits 10 or below, your strain threshold gets decreased by another 1 and your wound threshold gets increased by another 1. I would also like to note that hitting 30 on your morality again does not mean you're out of the dark side. Not yet. You have to reach all the way back up to 70 to get out of the dark side. This is what we call going through a redemption. And remember, this is a narrative game. There needs to be some sort of narrative that's happening alongside your character's redemption. Now let's talk about the light side bonuses. If you hit 71 or higher, you become a light side paragon. For every light side force user that is in the party, you'll get 1 additional light side destiny point added to the pool. If you reach 80 or more morality, then you get +1 to your strain threshold. And if you reach 90 or higher, then you have an additional +1 to your strain threshold. So let's get your obligation, duty, and morality onto the page. This will be on the back of your character sheet, so look to wherever you see obligation, duty, or morality. Write down your starting magnitude for your obligation or duty or your morality number. If you were a light side paragon, write down 71 for morality. If you were a dark side user, write down 29. For everybody, if you took XP or credits, you can write down in the XP section on the front of your page or the credit section on the back of your page anything that you took. If you're using RPG sessions, you can scroll down to the bottom of your page and find obligation, duty, or morality, and you'll just click the little button and you can write down whatever your obligation and its magnitude is, and if you want to add any details, you can. Same thing with duty, and same with morality. Add morality, write down your emotional strength, emotional weakness, and your value is either 50, 71, or 29. Leave your session conflict for 0. That builds up each session. And then as you apply the conflict, like we said earlier, you'll change your value and set your conflict back to 0. Step 3 is species. There are many alien races in Star Wars, and you have plenty of options to choose from in this game. Each of the 3 core rule books will have 8 species options to choose from. The books have a little bit of overlap, such as they all have human. If you want more options, there are source books out there that have more options in them, or if you want for free, you can just check out the Star Wars wiki page. I'll have a link to that as well in the description below. The books, however, will have information about physiology, homeworld culture, and other specific details about each species, so that way you can understand the background of where your character maybe came from. Each species will also have different starting characteristics, different wound thresholds, different strength thresholds, different starting XP, and special abilities. For this walkthrough, I'm going to choose playing a Togruta character. When you write down your species characteristics, write them down lightly because they can still change before the end of character creation. For my Togruta character, they start with 1 brawn, 2 agility, 2 intellect, 3 cunning, 2 willpower, and 2 presence. For your thresholds, if you're using pencil and paper, write lightly because again, these numbers may change by the end of character creation. For the Togruta, it says wound threshold is 10 plus brawn. So in this box, I'm going for now, just put 10. For strain threshold, it says 11 plus willpower. So in this little box, I'm gonna write 11. The reason we're writing all of this lightly is that these characteristics, your brawn, agility, intellect, cunning, willpower, and presence, might change by the end of character creation, which would in turn change what the starting thresholds are. For me, it says my starting experience is 100, so I'm gonna write down 100, and you can find those fields at the bottom of your character sheet if you're on paper. If you already have some XP from your obligation, duty, morality, then you would just add whatever your starting XP is to that. As a Togruta, my special ability is that I gain 1 rank in perception at the start, as well as Togrutas have a talent called Pack Instincts that when performing the assist maneuver, Togrutans grant 2 boost instead of 1. And if you're on paper, you can write this down in this little box right here. If you want to play a droid specifically, I actually have a separate video on that just because there's a bit of different rules and stuff relating to it, and that's kind of a whole thing, so check that out. It's going to be a card up above. As you can see, species does not take very long, so let's move on to the next step, which is our career and specialization. I'm not going to be going into super depthy detail on what each of the careers and specializations are. The book has a detailed explanation on each. That said, you can get a pretty good idea from the names. So look at the ones that sound interesting to you and then read the description of the few that interest you. So what is the difference between career and specializations? Well, it's kind of like a class and subclass. You have your career and then you have a focus or specialization within that career. Each core rulebook will have 6 different career options and each career will have 3 different specializations. There is also a source book for each career that will have an additional 3 specializations inside of it. So if you like a career like the bounty hunter but you're not drawn to any of those specializations, check out the book Notice Integrations or check out the wiki and see the other options available. Each career and specialization will also come with some career skills. Now during character creation, you will get some free ranks in those. However, the actual bonus to those ongoing is that it is cheaper to spend XP on career skills to level them up than non-career skills. If you're using pen and paper, what I like to do is I like to just draw a little teeny tiny star next to the name of the skill to indicate that it's a career skill. If you're using RPG sessions, what you could do is you can click the little check marks to indicate what are career skills. My Togruta wants to be a smuggler with a specialization in thief, so I can see from smuggler that I get these 8 career skills: coordination, deception, knowledge underworld, perception, piloting space, skullduggery, streetwise, and vigilance. If you're playing Edge of the Empire or Age of Rebellion, you will get 1 free rank in 4 different skills. If you already have a starting skill with like perception, you may add on top of it for that 1 free rank. So for me, I can choose 4. I'm going to select perception, skullduggery, vigilance, and streetwise. Next, we're going to look at your specialization additional career skills. On your sheet, this should say something like Thief bonus career skills. So for Thief, it's computers, skullduggery, stealth, and vigilance. No matter what book you're using, you will get 1 free rank and 2 different specialization bonus career skills. You might notice that some overlap. That's actually fine. What you can then do is you can opt to take the 2nd rank of whatever is overlapping. In my case, I could take the 2nd rank of vigilance and the 2nd rank of skullduggery. This is actually more cost efficient because each rank gets more expensive. But these are freebies, so you're kind of saving money in the long term if you like to optimize the amount of XP and stuff you have if you're that kind of player. One important thing to note though is that you cannot go above rank 2 during character creation. Okay, at this point you'll want to print out your character's specialization tree. You can either do that by scanning the book at a printer or by finding an online resource. I'll have a link down below to the Star Wars RPG community website where they have printable pages for every single career and specialization. If you're using RPG sessions or really any virtual tabletop, due to copyright reasons, there's no way to import in those trees. You're going to have to type them in yourself. But on RPG sessions, what you can do is you can go down to your talents, add new talent group, go to tree, click create. You can name it whatever your career and specialization is, and then your tree has these little connector bits, so you can represent that here by clicking on these little connectors. Don't worry about the join button, that's for like force powers later if you have them. And then to add the talents, you click on the block, and you can add the name, add the description, and then add any qualities if there's automation stuff. I have an actual full RPG sessions video that I'll also put up in a card up above or down in the description below if you want to learn how all of that stuff works. If you are playing a Force and Destiny tree, at this point you can write your Force rating as 1, or if you're on pencil and paper, that should also be at the top of your page. Okay, on to the next step, spending XP. So there's a few things that you can spend your experience points on. Characteristics, so like your brawn, agility, intellect, cunning, willpower, presence. Your skills, like stealth, athletics, range, light. Your talents, which are the passive and active abilities that are found on your talent specialization tree. You can also buy new specialization trees. And if you're a Force user, you can spend XP on buying Force powers like Move and Influence. Let's talk about each of these, starting with characteristics. These can only be upgraded with XP during character creation. So, with that in mind, I recommend putting as much XP as you can into these characteristics because they're going to be stuck like this for the rest of the campaign pretty much. And all of your roles are affected by them. There's only one way to increase these after character creation, and it takes a while to do so. But I'm going to touch on that in just a minute. So, Cost to increase characteristics is 10 times the number you're going to next. So if you want to go from 1 to 2, you need to spend 20. If you want to go from 2 to 3, you need to spend 30. If you want to go from 1 to 3, you have to spend 20 and then 30. You must increase them incrementally, no skipping, you dirty cheaters. And the off chance you have enough XP, you may not increase characteristics beyond 5 during character creation. 5 is the max during character creation. This is where obligation, duty, and morality can be really helpful. If you have 20 XP left to spend and you want to get one more characteristic from 2 to 3, you need 10 XP. How can you get 10 more XP? Well, obligation, duty, or morality starting bonuses. Your second option for spending XP is skills. Ranks 1 through 5 cost 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. However, if it's a career skill, then it's 5 cheaper per rank. So it'll be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And like characteristics, these have to be purchased incrementally. If you want to know what all the different various skills are, I actually just did a video on this going in detail on each one. So click the card up above. The third thing that you can spend your XP on is talents, which can be found on your skill tree looking page from your specialization. The cost of these you'll see from each block, but each row typically has its own cost. So the top row is 5, the next row is 10, the next row is 15, then 20, then 25. You have to start at the top, and then every talent you buy has to connect via the lines to the top row. Some pages have weird paths. Yes, that is intentional. Yes, for the scoundrel, you have to go all the way down and then all the way back up again. Your next option is buying new specialization trees. If you're buying a new tree within your career, so for example, let's say you're a bounty hunter assassin wanting to purchase bounty hunter gadgeteer, then the cost is 10 times how many trees you'll have. So if this is your second tree, then it'll cost 20. To buy a third tree from the bounty hunter career would be 30. However, let's say you want to purchase a tree from outside of your starting career. Then there is an extra 10 XP that you must add to the cost. So if you're a bounty hunter assassin wanting to buy your second tree from a hired gun, this would cost 30 XP. You have your 10 times 2 is 20 with an additional 10, that's 30. Even after purchasing the hired gun tree, your starting career is still bounty hunter. So another hired gun tree after that would still add 10 XP, meaning 40 total. There are some universal skill trees that are found within some source books, and even some that are like Force users in Edge of the Empire and Force and Destiny that are universal skill trees. Those will be 10 times whatever number tree it is for you. So if it's your second tree, it's still just 20. When you buy a new specialization tree, you will mark the additional specialization career skills on your sheet. However, you do not receive any free ranks in those skills. The reason to buy other specialization trees could be for more talents or cheapening future skill ranks with new specialization career skills. But another reason to maybe buy that tree is for dedication or force rating talents, which is the only way to increase your characteristics after character creation or increase your force rating past 1. If you start in Edge of the Empire or Age of Rebellion, you don't start with a force rating, but if you buy one of the force sensitive universal trees or a Force and Destiny tree, then at that point you get 1 rank in force rating. And then last but not least, Force users, you're able to spend your XP on force powers like move, influence, battle meditation, etc. You can find those further back in the core rulebooks. Age of Rebellion and Edge of the Empire, though, will have far more limited options than Force and Destiny. The page number will be on screen. Those trees cost only as much as the top block on the tree. Keep in mind, though, that your force rating has to be equal to or higher than the force rating listed underneath the title of the force power. So a couple of them have a prerequisite of needing a 2 or 3 force rating, which starting at 1 means you can't access those powers yet. Don't stress out if you can't buy everything that you want to buy now. You will get XP after every session you play, so you will eventually be able to buy all this stuff. And these same XP spending rules apply besides the characteristics being locked, unless you buy the dedication talent, and then you can increase one of them by 1. So to give an example for all of this, let's go back to my Togruta character. I have 100 starting XPs, so I'm going to spend 40 to increase this to 4. I'm going to spend 30 to increase this to 3, and I have 30 remaining. Normally, in a normal game, I would probably do like presence to 3, but just to kind of show you how to count the other stuff, I'm not going to do that for this example. So I'm going to keep my 30 XP and I'm going to spend it on skills and talents. So rank 1 computers would be 5. Rank 2 would be 10, so that's 15 total. I'm not going to do that though. So let's do 1 rank in computers for 5. I have 25 left. Let's do 1 rank in cool. That's 10 because it's not a career skill. So that's 15 total spent XP so far. And I want to take a second rank in Streetwise for 10. That's 25 XP spent. For my last 5 XP, I'm going to buy talents. I didn't write them down here, so I'll throw the page on screen. I'm going to buy this top left talent for 5 XP. And then I'm going to mark my available XP to 0 because I spent it all. I'm going to throw an XP spending cheat sheet on screen. So if you're still spending your XP, pause the screen, finish spending your XP, and then resume when you're done. Okay, moving on to the next step, derived attributes. This is your wound threshold, strength threshold, soak, and defense. Let's start with your wound threshold. This is going to be your character's physical health bar. This is going to be determined by your species, wound threshold, plus brawn rating. For my Togruta, we wrote 10. So 1 plus 10 is 11. After character creation, increasing your brawn does not increase your wound threshold. You can only increase it by specific methods that say they increase your wound threshold, such as the talent called Toughened, which may or may not be on your specialization tree. Strength threshold is going to be very similar to wounds, except it's your mental health bar. It's going to be your species' strength threshold plus your willpower. So for me, it's 11 plus 2. And again, just like wounds, increasing your willpower later does not increase your strength threshold. It can only be increased by specific things that say they increase it, such as the talent called Grit, which again may or may not be in your specialization tree. Next, let's talk about defense, and it's split between ranged and melee defense. Pretty much the way this works is for every 1 defense you have, an enemy trying to attack you would add 1 setback die to their attack. So let's say you're trying to shoot an enemy, and they have 3 ranged defense. Then you would add 3 setback dice with your attack. If you try to stab someone who has 2 melee defense, you would roll 2 setback dice. Defense is going to be determined by your clothes or your armor primarily, but sometimes talents or weapons can increase your defense. The ranged and melee defense numbers can be different from each other, though if a source of defense does not specify ranged or melee, then you just increase both by that amount. And last, but certainly not least, is soak. This is going to be flat damage reduction every time you take damage. So if somebody shoots you for 7 damage and you have 3 soak, then you only take 4 damage. Soak is going to be equal to your brawn rating plus whatever your clothes or armor give you. We haven't gotten to purchasing stuff yet, so my brawn is 1, so right now my soak is just 1. And for the same reason that we haven't bought any armor, our defense is still 0 as well. Soak is different from your wounds threshold in that if you increase your brawn later, your soak does go up with it. Okay, on to the next step. We're going to talk about motivations. This is a very important part of your character. This is going to be your character's goals, what drives them forward in the story. Every good character, whether that's a player character or a non-playable character, needs to have goals. It'll help push the story forward when the game stalls, or if the story stalls, or if you get stuck. I could make a whole video on goals, but no player should ever get stuck if they have a strong goal, because you should always know what to do to move towards your goal. Goals should also have some cohesion with the rest of the party and with whatever the story is going to be. A bad goal could be something like, I want to go and start my own business on Coruscant, when the story has already been determined that you're going to be sitting on Tatooine the whole time. And that could cause friction and even end up with your character leaving and having to create a new one. So keep that kind of stuff in mind when you're picking your character's motivations and goals. Your motivation can be public to the rest of the group, or you can keep it between yourself and the GM. That is completely up to you. And GMs, if they're keeping it a secret with you, it is your job to make sure that it's going to have that cohesion with the rest of the party and with the story that you have set up. So in the book, there are 3 tables under motivation that'll give you some ideas for what to choose from. I want you to read through all of the tables, choose 1 or 2, and if you choose 2, make sure they're from different types of motivations, such as one of the tables is for relationship motivations, another table's for ambition motivations. And just like obligation or duty, you can actually work with your GM to create a motivation if you don't see anything here that fits your character the way that you think it should fit. So let's input our motivations on RPG sessions. And for my Togruta, I'm going to say the motivation that he has is he wants to bring down the Hutts by any means necessary. Good luck with that, Togruta dude. Hope you succeed. I rather doubt it. Okay, on to step 9. This is going to be gear and appearance. Every character will start with 500 credits, and you will use this to buy your starting gear. If you took bonus credits from your obligation, duty, or morality, then you would add that 500 to whatever you chose. I'll throw the pages onto the screen so that way you can skip to the part of the book that has all of these items and options and weapons and armor and stuff. However, unless you took the bonus starting credits, expect to be priced out by quite a bit. You might have to end up choosing between a weapon or armor, or maybe something something that's not super great in either category if you want both. But hey, isn't that what progression is for in these kinds of games? You can work towards a better gear. I'll be going over weapons and stuff more in detail later with their damage and crit ratings and what does all of that mean. And that'll be when we hit our combat chapter later in the series. But the general gist is that damage you want to be higher, and crit rating you want to be lower. If you're curious about some of the additional tools or items, the book has descriptions for everything right there in the book. But if you read the book and you're still confused, you can drop me a comment down below. I'll do my best to answer. So after you've spent all of your credits and you've written down all the gear that you need to write down, roll a D100 and add whatever that number is to the credits you have left. This is going to be your starting pocket change for when the campaign begins. On the back of your character sheet, you should see this little box for appearance, or in RPG sessions, you should see this pencil with a notable features box up here. And that's where you just put down what your character looks like. And the book goes into a little bit of detail about personality, but the TLDR is that you don't have to have it 100% figured out right now. Do not be too worried about what's my character like. Just make sure you enjoy them, and just as importantly, make sure that your GM and the other player characters will also find your character enjoyable to be around. And just to give a little bit of experienced advice here, don't play the sulking, brooding character that never opens up to their party. If you want to be a shadowy, roguey kind of character, that's fine. Just go ahead and just decide to trust your party early. That makes the game so much more fun for everybody. And now you are done with your character, but there's one more step to go. This is the group resource. The party as a whole gets to start with a group resource, and you have different options depending on which book you're playing out of. So let's dive into the options of each book. In Edge of the Empire, you'll start with a starship. The first of three options is a Wayfarer medium transport, which is good for larger groups as it has ample space for crew, passengers, and cargo, but it's not great at maneuverability or combat. Your second option for a ship is the YT-1300 light freighter, aka the Millennium Falcon, which is a great all-around jack-of-all-trades kind of ship with lots of upgrade options to lean into however you decide to plan to use it. And the third option is the Fire Spray, aka the Slave One, aka Jango and Boba Fett's ship, which will have less space for crew and cargo, but it excels in combat scenarios. If none of these options sound like a good fit, you may choose another one with GM approval that is 120,000 credits or less. Moving on to Force and Destiny, the first option you have is a Jedi Holocron. This will contain some helpful information for the players, as well as give every single party member the same 2 career skills. This can be determined by one of 2 ways. Either the GM will roll randomly and look at a table on page 109 of Force and Destiny, or the GM will just choose 2 skills that they think the party might want the best or might be most helpful. So if the GM chose athletics and vigilance, then every single character in the party would then have their athletics and their vigilance as a career skill. There are no free ranks in the skill, just it's cheaper to spend XP on later. Your second option in Force and Destiny is the G9 Rigger Starship. You're not tied specifically to this ship though. If you don't like it, you can choose another one from the book with GM approval as long as it's under 70,000 credits. And your last option is going to be a mentor. This mentor won't really be with you session to session, however they can provide some advice and guidance for the players. Additionally, after character creation, it makes Force powers cheaper because they help train you in the Force and help you become a better Jedi. With a mentor, the base version of powers will be 5 experience cheaper. So if the base power for move costs 10 XP, then it would cost 5 XP. Keep in mind, this only applies after character creation, and it does not apply to any of the upgrades for Force powers. And in Age of Rebellion, you get to acquire Rebellion resources. Your first option is an Imperial Lambda shuttle. If you have Imperial codes, this could be a great way to skip past the enemy lines. It's a slower ship, but it's sturdy, and it can hold cargo as well as the party. Option 2 is a squadron of Y-Wings. This is going to be if you want the option of having multiple ships, and these are medium attack fighters. The party will get as many Y-Wings as half the party rounded up. And your last option is a rebel base. This is if you want to join the fight as a more local-oriented battle instead of a much larger galactic scale. I imagine this would look something similar to our heroes on Lothal as we see in Star Wars Rebels. The crew will get 1,000 credits to spend on starting resources for the base, as well as the players will be able to talk with their GM and decide where they want their base to be. What planet do they want to be based on? Is this going to be hidden in the back of a junk shop? Is it going to be some underground secret base? The players will work all of those details out with their game master. And that is it for character creation. If you found this video helpful, please do me a favor, blast the like button. This took so much work to put together. This video was sponsored by RPGsessions.com. They are my personal favorite virtual tabletop for Star Wars RPG and Genesys, as they were made specifically for this system. And RPG Sessions is free to use, free to sign up. They have so many great features that they continue to roll out continuously with wonderful systems for creating encounters, tracking initiative, tracking destiny tokens, great automation features on your character sheets. It really is just unmatched. So if you enjoy the content on this channel and you want to play online, check out rpgsessions.com. I'll have a link down in the description below. Sign up for free and try it out today. If you want to see more cool Star Wars RPG content, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below. I do my best to answer every single one. If you want to see Star Wars RPG in action, I recommend checking out our actual play campaign called Dark Underworld. We finished it a few months ago. Episode 1 is going to be on screen for you to check it out. As well as if you subscribe, we have another actual play starting soon-ish. So keep an eye out for that. A huge thanks to the Patreon supporters. Your support means the world and it is so incredibly helpful. Thank you, thank you. Thanks everybody for watching. I will see you all in the next video, but until then and as always, may the Force be with you.